And I was born right at the end of the Depression. My dad didn't have a car. People in the church didn't have jobs. But that never seemed to bother too much on the farm because we always had food, and people always needed the products that they produced. But I loved the animals, and I loved helping with all the chores, feeding the chickens and feeding the hogs and pumping water and going to get the cows from the pasture. And watching, I was too little really to do much with horses, work horses. They're huge animals. But I was able to help put up hay and help with the threshing. They threshed in a threshing ring with a number of farmers in the neighborhood, and one farmer owned a threshing machine, and they would go from farm to farm according to whose crop was ready. Every farmer cut his own grain, his own wheat and oats, and then they put it into shocks in the field to let it dry and cure. And then the farmers would go with the horse and wagon and pitch it onto the wagon. Somebody on the wagon would load it just right, and then they would bring it into the barnyard and pitch the bundles into the farm or into the threshing machine, and it would separate the grain from the stalks and the hulls and blow all of that out into a big straw stack, and the grain, blow that into a wagon. Then they hauled the grain to the barn and put it in grain bins. And all of this work was done by hand using a pitchfork and a shovel, except the threshing machine was run by a tractor. Now, when I was very little, the neighbor had a steam engine, and they ran the threshing machine with a steam engine. And I was very little, and I liked the man that owned the threshing machine and the steam engine, but it made so much noise, and the big whistle that he blew scared me. So I would go out and I would cover my ears, and he'd see me come, and then he'd blow the whistle for me. I don't remember how old I was then, probably 4.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe 4 or 5.
Steam engine, though. What was the fuel source? Coal?
Coal.
Coal, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Coal. It is a huge machine, the steam engine.
Yeah, they don't probably make much like that anymore.
No. No. But, and they didn't have electricity on the farm. It was just that neighborhood. But in order to get electricity, all the neighbors had to go together and pay to have the power line run to their neighborhood. And the people in this neighborhood didn't want to pay. It was right after the Depression, and money was scarce, and they didn't want to pay. So finally, my uncle, out of exasperation, went and paid to have the power line run to that neighborhood so that they could have electricity. So then I remember being there when they turned the electricity on for the first time. My uncle had an electrician come, and they put lights in every possible place that they would ever need it, in the barn and the house and the chicken house. And then they could have a an electric pump in the well, and they could have running water. Up to that time, the running water was a bucket that you carried to the well and the pump and filled the bucket and ran it back into the house.
So you did a little bit of that growing up.
Oh, a lot of it.
Yeah.
A lot of it. Raised a big garden.
Was this for me? That was yours.
I think, I don't know where I put yours.
Oh, okay.
It's over there behind you.
I'll just grab it real fast. Sorry to interrupt. I thought
That's okay. My aunt would give me a basket and tell me, go to the hen house and gather the eggs. And when I was real little, I was afraid they'd peck me. And I learned to grab the chicken's head and get the eggs out from underneath her.
Okay. Did you have any roosters?
Oh, yeah.
Were they mean?
No, not.
Oh, no? Okay.
No.
We had a mean rooster.
A wide area where the chickens ran free, so it was not. Then we had little chicks about big as your fist that you'd get in the spring. We had 2 houses of those to raise chickens, one to sell, and another they would pick out good ones to keep for the hens to lay eggs, and then they had chickens to eat. And when they got so there was a company in town that had freezer space, then you could cut up chickens and take them and freeze them. It was fun to see the chickens grow, and I was always a part of feeding the chickens morning and evening. Then every evening at about sundown, you had to go shut up all the chicken houses to make sure all the chickens, all the way from the little chicks to the old hens, in the chicken house, because a fox or a coon would get them.
Yeah.
So you had to make sure that all the chickens. And I think the routine of living, following a pattern of morning, evening chores, milking, and knowing that these things had to be done, nobody else would do them. You had to do them. One of my chores was pumping water with a hand pump into the horse tank where the horses and the cows drank. Well, there's a lot of water. So I'd have to go out and pump and pump and pump, and that was some in the morning, but mostly of an evening, to go pump the water.
And this is pumping, like you're pumping
with a hand pump
the whole time to get the water up. It's not like you just turn it on and
no, there was no.
Yeah.
No, there was no way. You pumped it by hand. Feeding the pigs was always interesting because there's the phrase "eat like a pig" came from watching pigs eat, and they would fight over the food and root and grunt, and my uncle would just allow me to participate as much as possible in everything that was going on.
Yeah, like even when you were young.
Yeah,
you get in there,
and as I was growing up, and I, depending on, of course, my size and my ability, as to what I could do, but if I was big enough, then I could help. Mm-hmm. We would go maybe 2 or 3 times in the summer for a picnic to a state park, Turkey Run or Clifty Falls or Brown County. But we had to get back in time for milking in the evening. So you could only go so far and stay so long. Mm. But I remember those. My aunt would fry chicken and have a pie or something, and and those times were a lot of fun.
Would these be chickens that you
Oh yeah.
took from the group?
And my aunt
Yeah.
would, when I was big enough, she'd say, "Go out and kill us a couple of chickens."
Oh, okay.
So I'd learned how to kill chickens,
Yeah.
and then she would bring the boiling hot water out, and she and I would pull the feathers off the chicken, and then I learned how to cut up a chicken so that it could be fried. Uh, I never cooked much. That's woman's work. I didn't do that. I was not a woman.
Yeah.
That would have been a disgrace to a boy.
Right. Right.
Or she would tell me, go to the garden and get about 10 ears of corn. And we just, all summer, as soon as the corn was ready, we had roasting ears, corn on the cob, every day.
That's great. So during the Depression, it's just like you're all self-sustained there on the
Yeah.
farm, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, it was. It didn't matter. She just or picked tomatoes. I remember taking the salt shaker and going to the garden and just eating tomato or two.
Just
Just
take
pick
one,
it and-
put salt on it.
Yeah, bite a piece out and put salt on it and
Yeah.
eat tomatoes. So we had sliced tomatoes, sliced cucumbers and onions, corn on the cob, fried chicken or pork chops or roast. Food and eating was, it just, I don't remember ever thinking anything about it, that how wonderful this is. We even had milk all the time because we had the cows, and
Yeah.
so you had milk and you had cream, and the food was never a problem, and you just didn't think about it.
Yeah. It's all organic too.
Yeah.
You don't have to
Well,
pay extra
yeah.
for that.
They always loved it when we had strawberries, and we had a big strawberry patch in the garden. I'd like to eat them. It was boring picking them, but that had, if you're going to eat them, you had to put up with picking them. But there was always a big strawberry patch, and we would make homemade ice cream because we had milk and we had strawberries, and so probably once a week we made ice cream.
Did you have a motor for that? Hook up to
No,
electricity,
it
or
was
you
hand
just
crank.
hand crank it the whole time? That's a
Hand
lot of
crank.
work.
Well, you didn't think of it as that, did you?
Yeah.
Bought a block of ice and brought it home and put it in a burlap gunny sack and used an axe on the flat side of the axe and pounded on it until you crushed it up so that
Oh, yeah.
you could use the crushed ice in the freezer. And that's another thing. Everybody took their turn. The men stood around, talked, and took turning the crank. So making the ice cream was an event, and you like to have company and make ice cream. And often the company would be people that had children, and the men would turn the crank on the ice cream, take turns, and they'd talk about farming and talk about family things. I grew up hearing all these old people talk about, even clear back to when they remembered clearing the land, farming when there were big stumps in the field, and relying on rabbits and pheasants and squirrels for meat at times. And I thought that's just what all the old people talked about, and I just kind of went in one ear and out the other. And by the time I got old enough to realize how unique that was, they were all dead. And they lived a long time. My dad lived to 96. My uncles all lived into their 90s. My mother lived to 86. My aunt lived into her late 80s. So I always had these old people around who talked about those things. And as a kid, I thought, oh, that's just what all old people talk about.
Yeah.
Boy, now I'd really like to have some of that recorded.
Yeah, for sure. Do you remember any of the interesting stories that they would tell, or is it kind of you feel like you've lost a little bit of that because it wasn't recorded?
My mother had a brother named Homer, and he always had a big garden. So, as a young man, I raised a garden for a while, and the rabbits got in it. And I thought, well, they surely get in Uncle Homer's garden. So I went and asked Uncle Homer, what do you do to keep the rabbits out of your garden? He thought for a minute, and he said, I shoot them. Couldn't do that in town.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But he talked about, as a boy, going hunting in the winter, and he said, I would go out to milk and do my chores wearing as little clothes, coats or sweaters and hats and so forth as I could tolerate. Then I'd come in and eat breakfast and then I'd go out and go hunting. But he said, then I could put on my heavy coats and so forth and I'd be real warm because I'd kind of gotten used to the cold a little bit. Mm. But he talked about hunting. Another uncle talked about coon hunting because the coons would be a pest and they'd have to go. So he had coon dogs. Had a big black coon dog that I decided one time that I was bored and I would make a cart and get that dog to pull that cart because you read about dogs pulling carts in a book. So I found some old steel wheels and a bunch of lumber, and Uncle Hummer, he didn't mind if I puttered in his workshop. So I made a cart, and I made a harness for the dog out of old leather and got the dog harnessed up and between the shafts on the cart, and he'd lay down. And I'd poke at him and lift him and get him up, and I'd get on the cart and he'd lay down.
Yeah.
I never did figure that one out. I didn't know I could make the cart and the harness, but I didn't know how to make him pull it.
Yeah.
The adults, they'd help me. They'd give me advice or help me do things. But I don't remember any of them telling me that's foolish or stupid or that's not going to work. They just let you try.
Yeah.
And if there was any of the work that was being done that I was able to do, I would be a part of it. If it were pitching hay on a wagon, I was big enough to pitch hay, I did it. When they were threshing, I always had some boy that was the water boy, and you had a jug that had burlap wrapped around it and kept the burlap wet to try to keep the water kind of cool. But every time one of the men came in with a wagon load of wheat or oats, then you'd take the water jug and he'd want a drink. Well, I wasn't big enough to throw that thing up on the top of the wagon, so I figured out I could throw a rope up there and tie the rope to the water jug. So I'd throw the rope up, and he'd pull the water jug up, and then he'd lower it back down to me. But one summer, that when they were threshing, that was my job, to be the water boy. I felt kind of important, I was a part of I was out working with the men.
You were maybe like 8 years old around this time?
Oh, probably.
About 8, yeah.
Yeah, probably 8.
That feels good when you're a young man you have a role for an operation.
Yeah. What I didn't like was when I had to go in and help the women to get dinner ready, because they always had big dinners. Because whatever farm they were threshing at, they ate dinner there. And if they didn't have room in the house, why, they put up big tables out under trees, and the women would come and work together and have these huge dinners You know, I don't know how men worked after. Most of them, they would, after they'd eat, they'd lay down under a tree and rest a while. But sometimes I'd have to go help. I'd have to go pull a lot of corn and shuck it, or I'd have to help kill chickens, or I'd have to go get tomatoes or help set the table and so forth. I really didn't like that very well. I'd rather be out where the men were.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. That was kind of a disgrace to have to go help the women.
It's kind of like a signal you're still a boy. You're not yet a man.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you wanted to be like a man. They'd put up hay, and I don't know how to describe the way they'd haul a loose hay in from the field and then have to pull it up in a barn with a series of ropes and pulleys, and you'd pull it up with a horse, and the horse would be on one end of the barn and the wagon with the hay is on the other end. So you had to have somebody to either ride or lead that horse to pull it up. So they'd be some guy on the wagon setting the big fork in the hay, and then some couple of guys up in the haymow, and I was the guy with the horse. And okay.
You didn't have walkie-talkies to...
And so you knew how far to go. There'd be a stick or something out there to tell you how far to go. And then you'd lead the horse out there and turn him around, come back, sit down. Then they'd dump the hay in the haymow and then pull the fork back down to the wagon. They get that set, and then it's okay. Lead the horse out there again.
So this was all loose hay. It wasn't square bale.
No, didn't have bales. Nobody had a baler.
Yeah.
Didn't have a tractor.
Oh yeah.
Farmed with
So
horses.
everything was all horses.
All horses.
Yeah,
Didn't have a tractor. But the big events were the coming of electricity, and when they finally got a tractor, and when they finally got indoor plumbing.
I guess were you there when they turned the lights on for the first time, or was that a big moment for you?
My cousin was a teenager when and I probably was in junior high, and he turned every light in the house, in the chicken houses, in the barn, turned every light on everywhere. Yeah, that was, that was bigger than Christmas.
Yeah, that's interesting because there's the symbolism of having an epiphany, the light went on in your head.
Yes.
And it's oh yeah, it was dark and then it's light. But to think about it in terms of not having electricity and then it going on and that sort of epiphany, that's a lot more.
Had kerosene lamps. One of my jobs was to fill the kerosene lamps. And out by the garden, there was a 50-gallon barrel, and it had kerosene in it for the stove. In the summer, they cooked with kerosene on the stove. In the winter, they cooked with wood or coal in a coal stove. But one of my jobs was to take the lamps, and my aunt would wash the chimney that got soot in the glass chimney, and then I would take the base of it out, and I'd take a funnel and pour coal oil in the lamps. And you had to be careful because if you got it all over the outside, it was a mess to clean up, and I had to clean it up. So
yeah,
that's another thing. You learned how to do things, because if you didn't do them right, you were the guy who had to fix the problem. So the life lessons to be learned, and the feeling of importance, the feeling of being a real part of real life and real work was a part of growing up. It was not, in the city, I always felt sorry for kids because I remember somebody saying, well, I had to carry the waste baskets out, but if I didn't do it, it didn't matter. But if you didn't pump the water, or if you didn't help milk, or if you didn't feed the chickens, it mattered.
Yeah.
It had to be done.
So you grew up with a sense of like, from the moment you could participate, like
Yeah.
those were important aspects of the overall operation
Yeah.
working, and
You were
had a sense
expected to do that.
of being necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anybody who didn't was tagged lazy. And God forbid you didn't want to be called lazy.
Yeah.
That would be horrible for them to think you were lazy.
Yeah. That's interesting though, because I think like my generation, I don't know, I never thought of myself as like necessary to the household working. I guess maybe until I got to be like maybe 12 years old or so, and we moved out to the country, and we did actually have a bunch of these chores that needed to be done, and animals, but nothing like being 4 years old and having that sense like, you know, built into you like as you're growing up.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting.
And I'd paddle around when I was little after my uncle, and even though he was carrying 2 buckets of feed, he'd say, open the gate for me. Well, if I wasn't there, he'd set the buckets down and he'd open the gate. But I was there. So he'd say, open the gate for me and don't let the chickens out. So you learn things, but you learn them not from a book, but you learn them from the people that are a part of your life and part of your family. I think that you know that you are essential and you are day in and day out associated with and learning from those people who are your relatives, and you get a sense of who you are from that kind of association. And you think today, you may not live close to any relatives. Your relatives, if you have very many, may live in a foreign country or from one coast to another. And you don't have that sense of days that we're cranky, or we have days that we're happy. And these are a part of being a human being with our brains and our emotions. We're not like a machine or a piece of electronic equipment. And to live successfully, you have to know how to relate to those people. You can't learn how to live successfully with joy and meaning and satisfaction by just relating to a piece of electronic equipment. But you learn those things because those were the people that made up your life, and you had to learn how. And you learned from the time your brain was developing. All of these circuits within your brains that were setting up the skills to deal with sight and sound and emotions and communication and understanding, those things were just automatically done because you were day in and day out constantly relating to all of these other people in a whole variety of circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, you just don't get that contrasted with like the way, like I learned a lot from just self-study on YouTube. And so like I'm just consuming the knowledge that way, but not like through participating in like operations with other people. I mean, obviously I got a lot of that as well growing up too, but yeah, I think that sort of learning on your own is totally void of what you're describing as kind of being a completely different, I guess, mode of moving through the world.
But then when I was home with my parents and had to live and function within the context of the congregation of the church, and my dad, for good or bad or otherwise, his life, total life, was totally the church. Dad was not one to be involved much in the community. He dedicated all of his days and all of his efforts and energy to the ministry of the church, which he felt really called as a teenage boy to become a minister, not a preacher, but a minister. Preaching was just a part of what the minister did. So life revolved around the life of the church. All of the activities, Sunday school, prayer meeting, Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and I was expected to be there in all of these events. And it was something that I could contribute to or participate in. In a way, it's kind of like the farm. I was expected to be a part of it. So I learned how to relate to people being a part of the minister's family and being a part of all the church activities, because you couldn't just say, I don't like it, I'm not going to go. You had to learn how to like it. You had to learn how to be a part of it. But there were a lot of church activities. These were country churches. The church may have been digging a basement under the church, or they may have been having a big Sunday school picnic out in somebody's farm and having a baptism in the creek. The church in these rural communities, church life was a large part of life.
Yeah.
There was school and church, but the church was every week, every Sunday, Wednesday night. The school was during the school year. So there weren't service clubs. Many of the people were farmers, and those who weren't had jobs related to the farm business. The good thing about it was living in small towns had a lot of freedom. I mean, nobody worried about their kids getting abused, or nobody ever thought about something like that. You never worried about your kids being abducted. My dad had a certain whistle that he did with his hands, and that was the way he called me, let me know he wanted me to come home. And I'd be at the neighbors, and I'd hear him whistle, and I knew I had to go home. Well, people in this small town, they all learned my dad's whistle. So wherever I was, if they could hear it, they'd say, "Your dad's calling you." Well, it may not. They may not even been a member of my dad's church. They may have been a Nazarene.
Yeah.
So, how to relate to people, skin to skin, hands on, in daily life and experience, it was just a part of life. Mm-hmm. When you went to school, the teacher that you saw in church on Sunday. The principal of the school was the Sunday school superintendent. The kid that was in your class, his dad was a farmer who came and plowed your dad's garden when it was time. These were all people that were you were immersed in life, in humanity, mm-hmm. and how to relate and how to communicate and how to manage your own emotions and how to make meaning out of these things just was a part of growing up. You didn't think about it. Mm-hmm. You just did it.
Was your dad, I know sometimes the role of a minister can be a little bit of almost like a therapist, in a way, on a lot of levels, everyone's bringing their problems.
No,
it wasn't a lot
that
of that.
wasn't.
Okay.
That was not very common
Oh,
in
okay.
my experience. Now, maybe before I was born, when they went through the Depression, also they did have some churches in the city. That may have been more of a problem then, but I wasn't. I wasn't I wasn't born. I didn't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, so I didn't know about that.
I wonder if back then there was just like a lot less of those interpersonal problems, I guess, in contrast to like how many there are today, kind of due to the way everyone kind of grew up in their communal settings, participating in the farm operations and that sort of thing, and they just kind of avoided some of those pitfalls because they've been enmeshed in uh, interacting with people in important ways, like since they were kids.
That's right.
You think so?
You learned human relations from the ground up because you
Yeah.
were immersed in it. You didn't
Yeah.
have television. You didn't have really. A lot of people didn't even have a radio, and activities were with other people. You went on picnics. You went to visit. You worked together. So the how to relate to people was a part and parcel of life.
Mm.
It was an absolute necessity in developing. You can see how the developing brain of a child, a big part of that was the skills, people skills.
I guess this is kind of a little bit of a change of subject, but you had your own like chicken business when you were in
Oh,
your teens, and then also you didn't you do some like trapping and selling of pelts and this sort
yeah.
of thing?
When I was in high school, was about the eighth grade. My friend, uh, dad was a doctor, and he believed in kids learning, giving them opportunities, and so and he was kind of a quirky guy, but he decided that his son and I should have the experience of raising chickens. Now, this had to be started before school was out, early in the spring when it was still cold when you started these chickens, and we lived in this little town, and so Doc bought a chicken house big enough to raise 300 chickens in,
Oh wow.
and uh, he had it moved to where in this little town he had enough property, so he had it moved there, and then he took us to the hatchery. There was a hatchery in this town, and here again, the hatchery owner and his wife were church members. You know, I knew them from church. So he took us down there and had this man show us the whole thing about the hatchery business, how they followed and heated the eggs in this rotating thing, and then we got to look in through the window and see the little chicks hatch and watch them egg crack and then crack a little more and the chicken poke its head out, and so then this little ball of fur, they we got 300 of them, and we had to learn how to have the equipment, a thing called a hover that kept them warm, and had to learn how to keep these little chickens under there, and how to mix the water with the stuff that kept the chickens from getting worms, and then when they got big enough, how to mix the feed. And here again, responsibility. You know, there's twice a day you had to go and check on the chickens, and some of them would get out and get cold and die. So, but you didn't want them to die because that was money.
Yeah.
And then when a chicken would get up to 2 to 3 pounds, 2.5 to 3 pounds, then you would sell it as a fryer. And people would buy several, and then they would clean them and put them in the freezer.
So you wouldn't do this for them. You would just
No,
sell them
well,
live.
one day Doc came home from the hospital where he practiced, and he had sold 26 chickens. Now, why 26? I never figured that out, but 26 chickens to the kitchen at the hospital, and we had to dress them. Well, our mothers were about choking him to death because, we didn't know how to clean a chicken. I knew how to kill a chicken, and I could get the feathers off, but I really didn't know how to cut up a chicken or so.
Oh, your mom always did that?
Yeah, Mom always did that. Well, so here we are, and Doc has gone to work. He's no help at all.
And he's the one that made the sale?
He's the one that made the sale,
Oh, okay.
and our mothers were just, they're steaming mad at him. And so my job was to kill the chickens. So I got a big stump and figured out that if I put two nails close together, I could grab the chicken's wings and the legs and hold them, and then I could put the head between there and take a hatchet and chop off the head. And I put them in a wash tub. And I killed 15 chickens all at one time.
Wow.
Which was not a very popular move.
Yeah.
So we had...
How old were you at the time?
Oh, I probably was in the 8th grade.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah.
So you're a young man.
Yeah, I was young. Yeah. I was young enough to do it. And then we took them down in their basement. They had a big basement and heated water, and our mothers worked with us. And then we'd get all those dressed, and then I'd go out and kill more chickens. My friend was not very work brittle at all, and first thing you know, he'd be playing or something. But we got it down to the last, I don't know, 6 or 4 or something like that, and the lights went out at night. Took a long time. So my mom and I got up the next morning and finished getting the rest of them ready, and Doc took all of those chickens to the hospital. But of course, it was money.
Yeah.
Sold a bunch of chickens, and the money came to us, and we had to keep a record, and we paid for the feed, and the thing we didn't have to pay, we didn't have to pay for the chicken house, and we didn't have to pay for the equipment. But we really learned a lot. And then the next year, they sent him off to boarding school, and I did it by myself. And Doc and I got along pretty good, and he got another chicken house. So I could raise 150 in that one. So I raised 450 chickens.
Wow.
that spring.
So this was like an everyday job for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Morning and evening.
Even when you were in school?
In school. I'd get up and go take care of the chickens before school, and then afterwards. I don't regret that. I think that was wonderful experience. Not only learning how to do those things and how to manage my time and use my hands and my mind, but the relationship with another adult man, one-on-one, where he trusted me, he gave me the opportunity, and we had to communicate on a regular basis to do this.
Yeah.
I think that was and may have had something to do with me becoming a doctor, because that was in this little town, the doctor was an important, worthwhile person. People respected him, and people relied on him.
Mm-hmm. When was it that you had the realization that you wanted to be a doctor?
Oh,
I'm gonna move this real quick here.
I
Should be okay.
I was very much involved in being a Christian as a person. That was fundamental Christian living, and that was very important. That was the most important thing in life. And my dad was a preacher, and I went to this small school for high school, and it had no science. They didn't have any laboratory science in the school. So I never had any chemistry, never had any physics. And I really had very little math. So when I went to college, I kind of just thought, well, I'd be a preacher. And I started in taking the courses that would lead me that direction. And the president of Taylor was not the president; he was the dean, and he had gone to a seminary in New York Theological Seminary, and I admired him greatly. He was a great man, a wonderful man. So I wrote to New York Biblical Seminary. I wrote and asked for a catalog, and they sent back and said I could pre-enroll, and they would guide me in the courses that I took. They wanted a transcript of my first 2 years, because that was at the end of my sophomore year. Well, I hadn't done real well. I hadn't done terrible, but I didn't like sociology. I strangely enough, and I hated writing. The worst course in all 4 years of school was freshman comp. Mm. So I just didn't like that, and I didn't do well in it. So I sent my transcript in, and they sent a letter back, said that I would have to make better grades or I wouldn't be eligible for admission. So I began to rethink this thing, and I went to the psych prof, and she gave me some aptitude tests. And the two highest on this one was to be a physician, and the other was to be some sort of a social worker. But that was down the list. So the top one in the test was to be a physician. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anybody except they're at school. And I changed to a pre-med course my junior year. So here I am taking math and chemistry.
Yeah, all the hard sciences now.
And now I'm on the hard sciences, which, I liked. It was great. You know?
Yeah.
It wasn't drudgery.
Yeah.
It wasn't. Some of the worst memories of college were Monday mornings where you had to have something that you had written. Every week you had to come in. I don't remember what to call it. But that was horror, terrible. I finally, when I did have to write a paper, I'd do all the research, which I didn't mind doing, and then I'd sit with Rosie and tell her, this is what I want to say, and she'd write the paper.
Oh, okay.
She loved to write and type and so forth.
So when did you meet her?
Third year of junior year.
Oh, okay.
In the choir, college choir.
You were singing as well?
I wanted to, and that's the first year I got in. I, I, I had a in in that little dinky school. You didn't have a choir.
Yeah.
We had a band, and I finally figured out. I tried a trombone, but I couldn't learn that very well. But I figured out that I could play the tuba. My brother was a band teacher, so he helped me a little bit, and they had a tuba, so I learned to play the tuba, and I played in the band in the high school. It was such a small high school, we didn't have enough boys to make a varsity and a B team, so some of the guys on the B team had to play on the varsity too. So here you are playing on a B team, then you played in the band between games, and then you played on the varsity.
Wow.
It wasn't hard to be a big shot
Yeah.
in a school like that. But I changed, and I made straight A's the first semester.
Wow. I bet that felt good after kind of struggling through the first 2 years.
Oh yeah. So then I told, and then my parents, nobody in our family anywhere had ever done anything like that. Actually, my dad was the first one in either side, except my mother. My dad and my mother were the first in their families to go to college. So here I'm going to go to medical school, and they thought, you have to have somebody, you have to have pull and money to get in medical school. I said, I don't think that's true. And it didn't turn out to be. They just didn't know.
Mm.
But they were uneasy from then on. So that's how I got, and I liked medical school. I even liked the first 2 years, the basic sciences.
And then did you do your residency on a Native American reservation, or was that after your residency?
Didn't do a residency.
Okay.
I finished 4 years, and then you could do an internship and go into practice. So I did the internship, and there was no war, but there was still a draft, a military draft. So if you were going to medical school, you got a deferment. I would have had to have gone in the military, except I was in medical school, so I got deferred.
Which sorry, it's probably obvious, but which war was this?
Oh, this was after the Second World War.
Like the Korean
No,
War?
no, hadn't had any. This was just after the Second World War.
So it was the draft for the Second World War.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then there was no war, and I had a friend a year ahead of me that went in I think he went in the Navy, and he just thought, I should do that. Yeah. They sent him to Chicago, and he did a whole year doing physical exams on healthy young men. And I thought, I didn't go into medical school to do that. I don't want to do that. And I found out, and I don't remember how I found this out, that you could go into the Indian Health Service, which was a part of the Public Health Service, and fulfill your draft requirement that way. Well, we were married, had 2 children, and we were looking for interesting things to do. So I signed up and got accepted and went into the Indian Health Service. And that's how I got in. That's why I went. And
So you just saw that opportunity, thought this looks like an interesting,
this would be
more
great.
interesting than checking out healthy people in Chicago. So
to go out to a reservation and practice like that would
like
be
a
great.
real adventure.
So they sent us to the reservation south of Phoenix, and Rosie taught homebound students that had polio. I practiced in this little hospital. When we had a full complement, we had 4 doctors. But we did the whole thing. There was, we delivered babies. We We did the whole thing. There was nobody else. There, you had to, if you had to have surgery or something, you sent them into the city.
Did
But we
you?
had consultants I could call on the telephone and
Oh,
ask
okay.
the surgeon or orthopedist, you know.
Did you feel at all like you were underprepared, or I mean, that's kind of like
You know, I really
um,
didn't.
you didn't.
I
Okay.
really didn't, because when I went to medical school, you got to do a lot of things. And when I went to in my internship, you didn't. They didn't have many residents. The interns did a lot of it. So I'd set bones and put on casts, and I'd sutured lacerations till I was cross-eyed, and
Hmm.
I worked in the emergency room a lot and took care of all kinds of. And I did a lot of inpatient medicine with pneumonia and a lot of children inpatient. So I'd had a lot of good experience, and I'd spent 3 months at Riley Hospital taking care of inpatient children, very sick children. And when I went to school, the students did a lot of deliveries at the charity hospital. So I really, it wasn't, it wasn't, it was exciting.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
You're there kind of on your own, but you had a lot of that experience
I
already
had a
built
lot of
up.
experience, and if I had to, I had, there are other doctors there, and we helped each other.
Yeah.
But we
And
had, but it was not only the medical part, but living. We went to the church. It was a Presbyterian church, and we had a seminary trained Indian minister, and they had a choir that wore robes, and we were the only non-Indians in the church. So that was a wonderful experience, going to church with the Indian people, and the choir was good, and we would go to neighboring churches and sing. Irvin had his bicycle out there. He lived nearby, and so Beth was riding on the back of the bicycle, not bicycle, tricycle, and he was pedaling her around. So I said, "Well, who's Irvin's girlfriend?" And she said, "Me." So, and they started school in a one-room schoolhouse with. They were by far and away the minority. Some of these little kids had never seen a flush toilet, and their folks at home spoke Indian, not English. So that never hurt our children. It never. They just walked to school and carried their lunchbox, and it was just their experience with the Indian people was. It's wonderful growing experience in human relations.
I bet. Yeah. So how old were they around that time? You had three kids at the time?
No, we had two.
You just had two.
I
Okay.
had two. They were maybe 4 and 2 when we went there. The oldest, Becky, went to 2 years on the reservation and then went into town. So the first year we're there, she didn't go to school. The second year, she started school. And Beth, the younger one, she started school in the Indian school on the third year we were there. We were there 5 years.
And they actually did they call you the preacher doctor? Was
Oh,
that a
yeah, yeah. Sometimes they would have me preach. I
Oh,
didn't.
okay.
I forgot about that. Sometimes when the pastor would be gone, they'd have to have somebody in the congregation preach, and I'd take my turn. So I preached sometimes, And in Indian, my name was Sapa Makai, which I think means the preacher doctor.
So you never like learned the language?
No, I didn't, because
Yeah.
that tribe spoke English.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was the tribe?
Pima, Pima, Pima.
Pima. Okay.
Yeah. Had the highest incidence of diabetes in the world in that tribe.
Wow. Just hereditary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. People would come in and to the clinic and say, I think I've developed sugar. I better come and have you check me. So they'd make their own diagnosis. We delivered so many pregnant diabetics that the Indian Health Service had a consultant come out from University of Ohio for his sake, not for ours. He said, you deliver more pregnant diabetics out here than we deliver at the University of Ohio.
Wow.
So they came out and studied. I can't tell you how great of an experience that was. And then when I came back to Danville, it was a piece of cake.
All these resources.
Yeah. All yeah, it was easy. Huh?
So when you came back to Danville, was that when you started your own practice?
Yeah.
And did you do that with a partnership immediately?
Well, on the reservation, you're an employee of the public health, of
Okay.
the Indian Health Service. So when I came back to Danville, I came back and joined two guys that I'd been in med school with. And they'd been here 2 years. No, 1 year. They'd been here 1 year. I came back in the second year. And then after 1 year, we decided to build an office up next to the hospital. And we bought land, 2 acres of land, and borrowed the money and had a company help us design an office building and build the building. So we were right across the parking lot from the hospital.
Okay. What year was that?
Oh, it would have been 60.
Oh, wow.
Probably 68 when we built our office.
Okay.
We
And that's the original office on Old 36 next to the hospital there?
Yeah.
That's the one. Wow.
Well, it's the one right across the parking lot from the hospital there.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I didn't realize that was that old and that you had like designed that from the ground up.
actually that was a soybean field. When we bought the ground, we bought the 2 acres and paid the farmer for his soybeans. It was not even in the city limits. We put in a well and a septic tank. But we wanted to be as close to the hospital as we could get because we did we did all the hospital work.
Yeah, going back and forth between the two buildings.
Yeah, we just walked across the parking lot.
I remember I had a really important job one winter when they had the snowplow had pushed some snow in between the two parking lots. I had to dig through so the
So
doctors
we could walk
could
back
walk
and forth.
back and forth. Yeah. I was probably 10 years old, I think. Probably less than that, actually, yeah.
Yeah, they plowed our lot and plowed our parking lot and plowed the hospital parking lot, and then we had a big pile of snow.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember that. Huh.
Yeah, it was a big snowpile. We would make, we'd cut the path through, but then we'd also like make the caves in the side of it, play there, yeah. So how long have you been practicing medicine total now? Like,
Well,
how many years?
I'd have to figure it out, but I started in practice in, it would have been 61.
61.
Went to the Indian reservation.
So almost 60 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long time. And you're still making house calls essentially, or are you doing work in the office still?
No, I have one assisted living facility that I take care of some patients in that facility, and that's all I do.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't do any hospice work anymore, no office work. I really do this because I wanted to. You know, Taylor, we have a number of doctors in our family,
Yeah.
and then your dad is like part of the family. And
Yeah.
so, in order to be able to talk to them and feel like I'm a part of it, I thought it was important that I keep practicing. I keep reading, I keep learning, I keep doing it. So we have things in common that we talk about. Peter, my granddaughter, Jenny Hawk, married to Peter Benziger. So between our family and Peter's family, we have 9 physicians.
Wow.
If we add your dad to it, that's 10.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty special.
It's a privilege. It really is.
And
Privilege.
yeah, over those 60 years that you've been practicing, I'm sure you've seen techniques and the way you care for people evolve. Has there been anything interesting there, especially as kind of you, a lot of your patients are older now. How do you, I guess, is there anything interesting, I guess, like kind of in the way you've seen things change shape over the course of
Well,
your career?
I started out taking care of delivering babies, taking care of children, taking care of families, and then they grew up, and I had younger partners. The younger patients go to the younger partners,
Mm-hmm.
and the older doctors, their patients get older. So I ended up practicing geriatrics simply as a process of what happened. So I belonged to the Academy of Family Practice. I was practicing when the Academy of Family Practice was first started, and I was in the first group that formed the American Academy of Family Practice. So I decided, I'm doing geriatrics mostly, so I quit the Family Academy of Family Practice and joined the Geriatric Society. And that's just a process of what happened. Practice is a lot different now, and I think I probably would not enjoy it as much now as I did because you don't have the scope. You're not enabled to do the wide variety of things. And if you talk to almost any doctor about the computer, they're just all frustrated because it takes so much away from the way you practice, so much time and energy and interchange with the patient that I think I practiced during a golden age.
Yeah.
We had X-ray, we had lots of antibiotics. Then we had MRI and CT scans. We had more and more successful treatment of cancer. So it was prior to the time I went into practice, there were a lot of times you couldn't do anything for people but comfort them. But but during the years I practiced, you could do things for people. You really could help them, which made it a lot more satisfying.
Yeah. Now there's more just like procedures and protocol in place that you have to kind of jump
Yeah.
through before you can actually even get a
Yeah.
determination to help someone in a specific way. And
Well, this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but not quite. If you get somebody with a broken left leg or a broken toe on then you send them to the orthopedist that specializes in the left leg, and if it's the right leg, wherein I did it, you took care of it yourself.
yeah,
So that,
it's the good old days are gone.
well,
Unless you get out there
I hate to
somewhere
say that,
and it- yeah.
I hate to say that, but for me, that's true.
If you were just finishing up your residency and starting out somewhere now, though, would you try to recreate the same sort of adventure you had in the reservation? Like, would you like maybe go to a different country and practice somewhere more remote, or how would you
I've
approach
thought
it now?
about that.
Yeah.
I really have. I really don't know. I don't know. We looked, Rosie and I looked pretty hard at going as missionaries, but it just seemed like our skills and our abilities, the kind of thing that I would have done on the mission field, didn't match the kind of thing that she wanted to do. And we finally decided, we better quit. We've got a family. We need to settle down and do something rather than keep wondering whether we ought to be missionaries or not.
Yeah.
So we kind of gave that idea up. But I always liked the idea of going off into some foreign country, and that was a little bit like Phoenix, about Arizona.
Yeah. Might as well have been a foreign country, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we were an hour's drive from a big city.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we could go to the theater, or we could go into town and have pizza. Or, we had the best of both worlds.
So maybe this is a sort of tough question. I don't know if there's a good way to get into it or not, but you take care of a lot of people that are geriatrics and kind of toward the last final phase of their lives.
Yeah.
What sort of insights does that give you into, helping, I guess maybe like coach people toward that end, but also,
I
just
think what you're
caretaking.
saying is, how do you live that last part of your life with any kind of meaning and satisfaction and success? And how do you help people do that?
Yeah.
Part of it is, I think there are probably two parts to that, maybe three parts. One of it is, if you're not a part of a family that includes you in the activities, where there are children and kids going to school and kids going off to college, people getting married, then you really are isolated. You live in a world without all of the excitement of being a human being. Just being among old people all the time. That's kind of tough. Then another part of that is, how do you help people live with disabilities? And that goes all the way from hearing loss and vision loss to difficulty getting up out of a chair and walking, the loss of muscle strength, the loss of a spouse. So in that end of life, you have to learn to live successfully with loss, because you live with the loss. And then the other part is dealing with death. Those are tough things, and there are helps and answers, but there are no good answers. Some people do it a lot more successfully than others. Mm-hmm. I have a lady now who's 103. She's going to be 104 at the end of this month. And I go into her room and she's listening to recorded books, or she's talking on the phone to her son who lives in Illinois. She can't see to read, and she wants to have physical therapy, and she wants to keep it going because she wants to be able to take herself to the toilet. She says, I hate to ask those girls to come in here and take their time to take me to the toilet. Now, this woman is living pretty successful at this life when she is so limited. You have some people who are not nearly as limited, but they just are depressed and pout and are angry. And if they're kind of hard to work with. The only thing they're focused on is their pain, or I don't like the food, or the nurse won't come when I call her. It's just life is one big complaint. Then I had one lady that was, I think, 90-some years old, and she said, I'm ready to die any time, but as long as I'm here, she says, I want to feel good and I want to do something. What happens in those people's lives that makes some so accepting of life as it is and accepting of their limitations and being somehow positive about it, and those who just are negative and unhappy and making everybody else unhappy? I suppose it's their basic personality, the way they were raised, or, I can use antidepressants. I think living in a situation where there are other people is much better than staying at home. Now, your grandmother does pretty good, I think.
Yeah, she's 97.
Yeah, but most people do not do that well being alone. The assisted living facility where I work, they may like to be alone of a morning and just take their time getting up, but most of them do much better when they're out to lunch and when they're out in the dining room, and if there's any activity going on, they're out where the activity is. They talk to other people. They form some friendships. They may have moved here from another state because they have to move here because this is where their daughter lives. And some of them never form a friendship. Some of them within 6 months are playing cards and going to knitting with the other friends and doing things. They want to go to Walmart, and they somehow make life out of what they have.
Yeah, and they develop a little community.
Yeah,
yeah.
They're, and some people just can't do it. They just don't have that ability.
Yeah. But there's no secret to helping coach people into making those right choices. It's just kind of whatever their paths
Well,
were growing up kind of shaped them into that final form, and it's
oh,
either good
I
or
think there may be things that you can do. Frankly, antidepressants they work with older people,
yeah.
and the facilities can have activities that revolve around food, or they do things that where families come in and are involved with them. They can promote things that help them. They can take away the things that make people afraid. People with dementia, they need to be in a confined environment where they don't have to make decisions about when to eat and where to go to eat and who to talk to. And they need to be in a confined environment that is set up for them. So things can be done to make life easier and better.
So I guess we've
Now,
been going.
what am I going to do when I quit practice?
What are you going to do when you quit practice?
Well, I guess visit my kids. I'll go out and look at your dad's garden.
Yeah.
And I'll go have supper with your folks, or I'll go to Texas and stay a couple of weeks with my daughter, or to California. I'll talk to them on the phone, all that kind of thing.
And come visit me in Sacramento.
Well,
if I ever go back there.
we're
I'm kind of on the road right now.
You'll have to come visit me, Taylor, because
Hey, that's where I am right now. So
I'm probably going to be in one place more than you are.
probably, yeah. One of your daughters is out there in California, and she does the neuroscience
Yeah.
work. I guess I know we talked about this earlier, but not on the camera. So I'm wondering if we can kind of touch on some of those things again in some form. So can you tell me a little bit about her work?
Her doctor's degree was studying patients born without a corpus callosum, which is the connection between the two sides of the brain. After getting her doctorate and going on in research, she has the largest collection of data in the world on people with this congenital absence of the corpus callosum. This has put her in touch with a lot of other researchers doing brain research. Being now on the research faculty at Caltech also puts her in contact with a lot of other people doing research on the cortical activity of the brain. So now, in conjunction with a number of those people in different parts of the world, they have established a consortium of researchers with the goal of sharing their data continuously and being a source of learning and questioning and progress that is better than each one operating in their own corner doing their own research. So they have members of this consortium now that are in 2 locations in Australia, one in Brazil, South America, one in England, one in Scotland, one in Paris, I think one now in Italy and one in Germany, and several in the United States. They have now had their fourth or fifth annual meeting where they do some of the organizational work, and then they have several days of presenting research papers. They have always invited people outside of the consortium to come and listen, but this past year was the first year they have invited researchers from anywhere in the world that have research, that are doing research in this same area, to submit papers. And then the consortium reviewed them all and selected those that they felt were the most pertinent and important, and asked those people to come and present their research at this annual consortium meeting, which was in Paris this year. Next year it will be in Brazil, South America. They are in contact with each other as they want to be, and anything to help promote each other's research, anywhere from funding to data to where to submit papers for publication, et cetera, et cetera. Her interest in the brain has made me more interested in it for a variety of reasons. One, it's fascinating, and it's a frontier area of learning and medicine, but it also gives me something to share with her, experiences of childhood, reminiscing, knowing that you are a part of this group of people, and that you are able to overcome differences of opinions. You can share differences in views of life, because the relationships are so much deeper and beyond that. It takes you beyond anger. It teaches you how to handle anger, how to live within an environment where there are differences of opinion, and where you have to resolve or accept or live with those differences of opinion, and still love and care for and have those feelings of affection and all the ramifications. You don't get that from an electronic life, from relating on the internet even. You don't have to learn how to put up with people's idiosyncrasies if all you see is their face or hear their voice. You don't experience the richness of facial expression, or know what it's like to be hugged because somebody is so glad to see you. There's a whole area of life. We don't have big families. We don't live close to each other. We communicate electronically. We don't. It's just, I feel sorry for the loss. But yet, if you look at it on another hand, is this going to just require some type of a different evolution of our brains and our emotions and our meaning of life? Will we just adjust and adapt? What's going to happen to the family when we live on different planets as opposed to even just living in across the country or different states from each other. With this rapid change occurring in communications and the way we live, will we as human beings evolve more rapidly? Will our brain adapt more rapidly? Rather than over centuries, will it be over generations that we evolve? You can see pretty easily that people born 20 years ago are different than people will be born today. People born 40 years ago, people born 60 years ago are so much different than people born 20 years ago. Will the evolution that occurs as a result of all these differences be more rapid? And these are questions that I think about and ponder about.
Well, I hope we come up with some answers for the people that are kind of missing those affordances of yesteryear, and yeah, I think it's really interesting territory that we need to come up with some solves for at the end of the day, or maybe like you said, the brain will evolve to do that on its own somehow, and the technology will advance to be more rich. But yeah, definitely.
I'll tell you an experience that I just have pondered over and cherished. Our daughter Becky was gone to Africa for a month doing rescue missionary work. She has a granddaughter that lives nearby and is accustomed to seeing her at least once a week. The granddaughter is 4, and when Becky came home, the first time that this granddaughter saw her, she threw her arms around her grandmother and she said, "Grandma, I miss you so much." That's a human experience that there's no other way to get but that.
Yeah.
"Grandma, I miss you so much." We must take time for each other. Taylor, doing this today, spending the time with you is far more important than what I've said.